Okay, guys, let's get started. It's already 10:11. I wanted to let you know that the GSIs have graded the exams, and we will release them by 12 noon today. We have a meeting, the GSIs and I, after this. We always meet on Wednesdays, and we'll get it together and release the grades on gradebook on PSpace. And I'll also let you know the distribution of the grades. But I do know the general average, and to our delight, I've taught this course for many years, and the mean was higher by 2 or 3 percentage points than typical. And that could be you guys are great. We can make our attributions. I think it might also be hopefully a little bit the introduction of iClicker questions to give you a sense of the kind of questions. Only they're better than the ones that I use in iClicker, I know. And hopefully I scared you enough or pre-warned you enough to take it seriously and study really hard for it. So, but the average was, it wasn't an A or anything, okay? It was 83.5-ish, I'd say, on both short answer and on multiple choice. But typically on the first exam in this class, we are barely making 80%. You know, I'm like freaking out because I know people want to be at least in the B minus range for the average. So we're solidly in the B range average for this exam. So it's good overall. We will obviously post your individual grades, and we'll post the rubric that we use, the GSIs use, to grade your short answer, okay, on the PSpace resources link, exam 1 folder. Please be sure to, you're going to get a chance to look at your exams in sections. So starting tomorrow, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, you'll get about 10 or 12 minutes to look at it. If you have issues and you want to look at it longer, go visit your GSI in office hours or come visit me. They can give me your exam. You can't walk off with the exam, okay? But you can, before you start worrying if we graded it right or not, please look through the rubric very carefully. They spent a lot of time coming up with a fair rubric based on looking at a sampling of your responses, so we're not too harsh and not too lenient and so forth, okay? But mistakes are possible. You can look. It's very unlikely, but it's possible, okay? Questions at all about that stuff? If you didn't do well on the exam or as well as you wanted to do, definitely come visit me or your GSI in office hours and let's talk about and try to identify what needs to be done for the next exam, okay? Okay, let's pick up where we left off on Monday. We were talking about or introducing the topic of the self-concept, people's identities, who we think we are. And we started off by thinking about all different places where our self-knowledge comes from. And we talked about various social cognitive kinds of sources of self-knowledge, like the attributions we make, the observations we make of ourselves, and the inferences we make from them. We talked about actually mindfully, in a controlled manner, introspecting about who we are. We talked about social sources of self-knowledge at a pretty micro level. My comparisons with my siblings, my friends, my peers. We talked about how parents and how they treat you, and your perceptions of their perceptions of you influence how you see yourself. Also at the more micro social level is the social context that you're in. Right now you're in a lecture hall with a lot of people around. You probably likely to act in a certain way, reflecting that context, versus if you were hanging out at Jupiter's around the fire or something with your friends. A different kind of social context, a different self that comes to the fore that's accessible in that context. We ended with one final source of self-knowledge that I'm going to talk about. There are countless sources of self-knowledge, but the one I ended with on Monday's lecture was a more macro source of self-knowledge. And I just want to spend 2 more minutes on that because I feel like that was rushed, and it is such a big It is such a historically important development in our field. This Hazel Marcus and Shinobu Kitayama piece was published, 25 years ago now? It is, me having grown up during this time, this was the seminal paper. It made an enormous impact on our field that lasts to this day. Prior to 1991, or prior to the early 1990s, we social psychologists were extremely Western, North American Western at that as well. Okay, like 80 to 90% of social psychology was based on North American samples. Okay, that is not social psychology, all of social psychology. What we now know 25 years later is that there are systematic, interesting, important cultural differences, and both cross cultures, and intra, within our own culture. There are different cultures of social class, of gender, of ethnicity, that importantly influence how we think, how we behave, how we feel in response to everyday social situations. And the distinction that they gave us back in 1991, alive and well today, is this distinction between thinking about yourself in this autonomous, independent, agentic, choosing, unique, positively unique way, in other words, having this interdependent self-construal, versus a self-construal that is more very much embedded in the social context, very much relational, very much attuned to other people, their needs and concerns, and wanting to adjust to others in the social context in the interest of maintaining interdependence, maintaining interpersonal harmony. And where I left off in a very rushed way last lecture was talking about what exactly does it mean? What is it in culture that leads to encourages these different kinds of self-construals? And I gave you some examples about the educational institutions in our culture, the kinds of things that teachers expect from students. They expect them to stand out. They expect them to raise their hands. They expect students to have their own unique, independent ideas. Teachers in the United States don't say, oh, just follow everybody else. That is not what is valued in the United States. The idea is to make your own path, okay? To come up with your own ideas. Who is the real you? What is your individual, unique idea? That is the kind of thing that's fostered in our schools, and we don't even sit there and think mindfully about how those kinds of values are being transmitted to us and encouraging certain ways of construing ourselves. I actually saw a talk by Hazel Marcus this past weekend. There was a conference in Ohio, and she was there 25 years later still talking about this stuff. Amazing stuff, really, still. And she showed as an example of a piece of culture that fosters the independent view of the self. And the example she gave, so she often will show things like, you should look at the advertisements that we have in the United States. This is part of our culture. They really foster an independent view of the self, okay? How can you stand out in your own unique fashion? You don't want to wear what everyone else wants to wear. You want to wear something in your own unique way. That's just one example. But anyway, the example she gave as a way in which educational institutions influence the selves people create was a welcome statement from a university. Okay, like the chancellor giving a welcome statement. Welcome to blah, blah, blah. You're going to be here to pave your own way. It was like laden with independent self-control imagery. And this institution was ours. Okay, so I'm scrambling this morning trying to find the goddamn statement so I can show it to you guys. But you might remember, but it's a letter you got when you accepted to Berkeley. And it's absurdly promoting an independent view of the self. Now that's all cute and fun and whatever, and we feel maybe some sense of pride, but what's interesting and important to think about is that not everyone comes to college with that view of the self. And some of the work she's really interested in lately is about socioeconomic status, social class differences in the self-construal, that people from lower and working class backgrounds can think of the self in more interdependent terms. So when you come to a culture like the university, American university setting, where everything's about being an independent self, that can set up barriers, can make it more difficult to adjust for those who don't conceive of the self that way. Okay? Now, I hope clear the other day that we all have bits of independence and interdependence, right? We have these different selves that come to the fore in different contexts. In this context, presumably, you are bringing to bear mostly independent self. But at home and family, with family, you may be having more of an interdependent self-control. And these things can be fostered and activated and created for different people and so forth. So if you're not one or the other, and not everyone in America has an independent self, et cetera, these are on average kind of differences. Okay? Remember this distinction. If you're interested in learning more, there's a ton out there. You can start with Hazel Marcus, but she has had many students who are doing terrific work in this area. Okay? I just wanted to point out it's so relevant here on this campus where there is so much cultural diversity. And it's not just about race or religion. Okay? There's all different kinds of ways that culture can influence how we see ourselves. Okay? Okay. Where are we going next? Let's see. Okay, we've covered a good number of sources of self-knowledge. Now I want to tell you about a few different perspectives on how all this knowledge we have about ourselves, stored here in memory, is organized, and what are some of the implications of how this knowledge is organized or related to one another. Okay, but I'm going to start slow and easy with, or annoyingly, with the concept of self-schemas, because this is something we know well, and I just wanted to point out that presumably your self-knowledge is stored in some sort of organized fashion in terms of different selves or self-schemas that you have. Remember that Hazel Marcus experiment that we went over to demonstrate how schemas speed up your processing? That was the same Hazel Marcus done in 1977, where she recruited people who were independent schematics, dependent schematics, and aschematics. Remember the study? Please, for heaven's sake, it's been a week. Okay, yes, okay. So these were individuals who thought of themselves as being very independent or interdependent, or dependent. They think of just dimension, independence or dependence as very important, and they're very sure they're not the opposite. So all of us here in this room have our own idiosyncratic constellation of self-schemas. Maybe you have a schema of yourself as very athletic, as a really good academic. You're really strong on the academic side. Maybe you're someone who's a really good counselor, or somebody who's really into student government. You have all different kinds of self-schemas. And the only easy point I wanted to make here is that just like all those other schemas we've been talking about, schemas about groups, traits, situations, and so forth, our self-schemas are doing a lot of influencing of our perceptions and interpretations. So at the most basic level, if I'm really schematic, I'm being athletic. That's part of my self-schema. I'm a really athletic person. You know, I'm going to be pretty attuned to things related to my athletic self-schema. I may be really attuned to noticing that somebody is wearing a certain kind of sneaker that implies that they probably run track. I may be very likely to notice that they're wearing a uniform, or that implies membership on some kind of sports team. Or somebody who doesn't think in terms of being athletic is just not going to be as attuned to that kind of stuff. They may not remember it at all. They may not have noticed it at all about other people. Okay? So self-schemas, like any other schema, you can imagine they're probably pretty accessible since they're about ourselves. Influence, attention, memory, interpretation, inferences we make, and so forth. Okay. Now I'm going to get a little bit deeper and talk about two theories that take this idea, this basic idea that we have all these different cells stored up in memory, and thinks about how they're related to one another, these different cells, and what consequences that might have for us. The first of these theories is associated with a empirical article that you need to read by Patty Linville, who I also saw this weekend, alive and well. And we had a 3 a.m. fire drill at the hotel, which was really fun to see all these social psychologists in PJs. I'm sitting there with my glasses, and it's 3 a.m. I'm like, this is a nightmare. Okay, it was like a nightmare. But she slept through it, so that's just an interesting fact. I saw her the next day, I'm like, oh, didn't that suck? She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, there's like flashing lights in each hotel room, the siren's going off, it's like crazy. She slept through it. But she did. And never say that I said this to the entire class. Okay, so self-complexity theory, this is a theory that builds on this assumption, or takes as a starting point, we've got different cells. Okay, we've got a whole bunch of different cells. I hope we're okay with that. It doesn't mean we're strange. It's actually an adaptive thing that we define ourselves in different ways, and that different cells come to the fore in different contexts. Now, the intuition that she had and that she picked up on is something you guys might be aware of. We all know those people out there, and you might be one of them, who seem to define themselves in maybe in terms of only one or two selves. Maybe you've got that friend who lives, breathes, and sleeps, or whatever, some sort of sport they're involved in. They are a swimmer. Or somebody who is all about going pre-med. They don't have a whole lot of different cells. They're all about studying my chemistry course. Oh, should I apply for that pre-med fraternity? Oh, what do I need to do? Oh, yeah, I'm going to go this weekend and talk to somebody who got into medical school. Somebody who really thinks in terms of just one or two cells. And then there's others of us who think about ourselves in many more dimensions. I like to paint. I like to rock climb. I'm a pretty good student. It's really important to me, my friends. Things like that. There's differences in how many cells, or how many important cells people have. Okay, so she's picking up on that idea, the idea that we have different cells, but that people vary in these different cells. And she also makes the assumption that's also very intuitive, that these different cells that we have, they're associated with different kinds of evaluations. Some cells we feel more positive about than other cells, right? I mean, I don't feel that positively about my neurotic self. I have it, hello, neurotic self, but I don't tag it with a particularly favorable evaluation. I have a nurturing self. I tag that with a more favorable evaluation. Okay, so these are some of the assumptions of the theory. You have multiple cells. Different cells are tagged with different sorts of positive or negative affect, and there's variability in how complex our cells are, our self-concept is. Now, what I want to make clear, because my example doesn't make this clear, is that complexity, according to Patty Linville and her colleagues, is not just about the number of different cells that you have. That's part of it, okay? But it's more than just the number of different cells you have. And I'll say why, or how exactly that works. According to Patty Linville, you are highly self-complex. You score high in self-complexity if not only do you have a lot of different cells, you're not all just about pre-med or all just about swimming, you have a lot of different cells, but importantly, your different cells are unique from one another, distinct from one another, versus the way you are, the traits, the behaviors you engage in these different cells, they could be very distinct from one another, or they can be very overlapping. Somebody with a lot of cells that all reflect being nurturing is not quite as distinct or as complex as someone who has many different cells that are each sort of tapping truly different, non-overlapping, distinct aspects of themselves. And I'll give you an example of this. Okay, so high self-complexity is defined by a large number of distinct self-aspects. Low self-complexity means you have not only a small number of cells, but they overlap. They sort of call upon similar behaviors, similar traits. And here is the example. Imagine two people. Well, imagine two people. You have Angelina and Macy. And Angelina is higher in self-complexity, not only because she has 3 circles, okay, reflecting that she has a leader self, a dancer self, and a friend self, but if you notice that the traits that she associates with these different cells are completely non-overlapping. Okay, Macy, she has lower self-complexity not just because she only has 2 cells, the 2 circles representing these 2 cells, but that the traits that she associates with these 2 cells are largely overlapping. The self that she is as a leader, she's a very concerned and supportive leader, and that's the kind of friend she is too. So really, those two selves aren't that distinct from one another. They may come to the fore in different contexts when she's leading a group or when she's hanging with her friends, but they're really calling upon the same kinds of behaviors and tendencies. They both are, okay? Now, what you should be asking yourself right now is, who cares? Okay, fine, some people vary. You can sort of probably place yourself and say, I'm pretty high, I'm pretty moderate, I'm pretty low. But why does this matter? Okay, this is the fun or, more fun or interesting part of the theory, and that is that it matters, she argues, in terms of how you react to positive or negative things that happen that are relevant to the self. How do you react when your friend tells you you haven't been very supportive? How do you react when you do really well at a dance performance? How do you react when your students in your, the group that you lead feel like you aren't doing a good job or are doing a good job? What are the consequences? What do you think, how do you think self-complexity might play a role in terms of your reactions to positive or negative feedback about yourself, depending on if you're high or low in self-complexity? Do you have any intuitions? Yeah. It's Kim, right?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
I would think, like in Angelina's case, her dancer self-station messed up in the dance performance, she wouldn't think that's her dancer and friend and leader. Like she would just make it about the dance performance and just fighting with that.
That's right. So what she's saying is that when you're Angelina and you have separate, non-overlapping kind of islands of cells that don't touch each other, when you get positive or negative feedback directed at one of those cells, the influence on how you feel about yourself, how badly you feel and how badly you feel about yourself, or how happy you feel or how happy you feel about yourself, is isolated to that one self. It doesn't get all messy and spill over to everything else. Whereas if you're Macy and you get bad feedback about how good of a friend you are, you're not a very good listener. This not only makes Macy feel bad about her friend's self, but because it is related to aspects of herself as a leader, it spills over. Okay, that negativity or positivity for positive feedback, it spills over and takes a sort of influences a bigger portion of herself. So the prediction from this theory is that the degree of self-complexity is related to how people feel or how they respond to positive or negative events related to the self, and that low self-complexity, as in this example just given, is associated with more extreme swings in affect and self-evaluation, positive or negative. So if you get a good test grade and you're really low in self-complexity, being a good student is everything to you. You really make a big deal out of that big test grade. Okay? I mean, so it's good in some ways, but really what most of the research is focused on is on how this can be a vulnerability, because we're really concerned with how people cope with negative events. And the low self-complexity people, according to his theory, are going to exhibit more extreme responses, negative responses to negative events. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Eye clickers, please. Okay, what's the question here? Assume Amy is higher in self-complexity than Bob. Which of the following is most likely to be true based on what you now know about self-complexity theory? Amy is higher in self-complexity theory. Amy is more upset than Bob about getting a poor grade on the important chemistry test they just got back. Amy feels less confident than Bob about her aptitude for chemistry after they both get poor grades on an important chemistry test. Amy and Bob are equally happy that they were chosen to be the editors of their senior yearbook, and Bob is far more ecstatic than Amy about being chosen to be one of the editors of their senior yearbook. Which one of those observations is a prediction that self-complexity theory would make, given the differences in self-complexity of Amy and Bob? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, let's make it a 251. Okay, and the correct answer is hesitant D. Yes, the correct answer is D, overwhelming, 79%. And the reason for that is Amy should not be more upset than Bob, but she should have less extreme reactions to that poor test grade. She has higher self-complexity. I indicate to you it's important to both of them. Amy feels less confident than Bob. It shouldn't affect herself as much as it should affect Bob, because she's higher in self-complexity. Amy and Bob are equally happy. Again, she should be less happy, actually. Bob should be more happy, which is what D suggests, because Bob has lower self-complexity. So positive feedback, just like negative feedback, results in more of a bigger affective and self-evaluative reaction. You feel more, and it has greater implications for how you feel about yourself. Okay? You're going to read more about this theory firsthand in an empirical article, the first one that's assigned in the second unit of the course. Okay. Second theory about how self-knowledge is related, organized and related to one another, and this theory, too, argues that there are affective implications depending on how self-knowledge is organized. The theory is, in some ways you could say similar to self-complexity theory, just in the sense that it too, like so much in social psychology, assumes we have multiple selves. Okay, big deal. And it too argues that there are affective consequences or implications with how self-aspects are related. I already said this. It's unique from self-complexity theory. It is its own theory. Here's what's cool about this theory. Whoops. This theory is interested in discrepancies between different aspects of ourselves. And what do I mean by that? Well, the theory argues that we have stored in memory an understanding of who we actually are. I am a professor, I am a mom, I am a blah, blah. I have actual self-aspects, things that I believe I actually am. But I also have hypothetical selves. And the theory is interested in particular kinds of hypothetical selves. There are all different kinds of hypothetical selves. I have future selves. We all have future ideas of who we might be. I have past selves, that dorky person I used to be and sometimes can still be. Okay? Your past, present, temporally different selves. We also have ideal selves, who I hope and wish to be someday. This is a self that this theory cares about, the ideal self, your ideal visions of who you'll be someday. And you also have selves reflecting who you think important people in your life think you ought to be, your ought selves. The selves that reflect your sense of duty and obligation to others. We've all got those too, okay? What mom wants, what your children want, what your boyfriend wants, what your friends think you ought to be. Okay, we have those stored in memory as well. And the theory is interested in, because for all of us, there's some degree of discrepancy between who you actually are and who you'd ideally like to be, and who you actually are and who you ought to be. There's differences in how discrepant they are. And the theory argues that the degree of discrepancy has an impact. I mean, imagine it. Somebody give me an example of who you ideally want to be. Yes, thank you. What? You would like to be your mom, okay? What is something that's cool about your mom?
You're very independent, how she raised us, and choose the school director,
Okay.
big career.
Okay, big career, very independent. Let's say you're reminded about how you don't have a big career yet.